right. Oh. Okay. Welcome, everyone, to the Elite Pro Podcast. I am Tate Griffin, joined by the Highwayman, Jake the Machine Davis.
About time.
And the other Highwayman, Leslie Leatherman.
I am the Highwayman. He's a Highwayman.
It's getting a little old.
He's the machine.
It's every week.
It's a weekly battle. And we have an esteemed guest. I would say the guest that we'd all talked about.
That sounded
wanting
sarcastic. It's the truth.
No, it is the truth.
But your delivery on it made it sound like bullshit.
Stop me if I. Wow. Stop me if I'm wrong, but this was the person that we said we needed on this show. The first guy on the list. And his name is Tim Walker. Pro Wrestling Illustrated photographer, Tim Walker.
Well, thank you.
And we're so glad to have you here.
I'm glad to be here. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I believe earlier you said it was going to be an honor.
It is an honor.
Maybe you could expand on that.
It is an honor.
How's that chair treat you, Tim?
I've got the special chair tonight. The extra comfortable, extra padded chair.
And somehow I got stuck sitting next to Tate.
Hey, I don't want to hear it. I'm sitting on the shittiest chair in the room.
I just meant your company. I prefer having the table between us.
I thought this was going to be a nice, polite discussion.
Oh,
wow.
This is as polite as it gets, sir.
It'll probably get... We'll be polite to you.
At least for a little while. All right. Feel free to fire some live rounds whenever you want.
We've seen each other's closets. We know what's in there. So we basically...
My mind is spinning.
All right. So he is right. We've talked about it. I think that for me, being a lifelong wrestling fan, you probably are the person that I know who has seen, I'm assuming, more live wrestling events than anybody I probably know. And not just being with one company and say, well, I've seen every match that the NWL's ever had or whatever, but you have seen from the top to the very, very worst.
Best of the best to the very worst.
And some in between. So, when did you start watching wrestling?
Stop that.
You should hit the table one more time so people can hear what
that is on the microphone.
When did you start watching?
When did I start watching wrestling? Well, my dad was a real big wrestling fan, and ever since I can remember, we would watch it on Saturdays at 11 and 4 in the afternoon out of Channel 20 and Channel 45 out of Washington and Baltimore.
Okay.
Just,
and how old were you? You were 5. So what era of wrestling was this? I mean.
So now you want to know how old I am?
Well, I mean, was this like?
What are you, his biographer or what?
Well, that's why he's here, right?
Right, the life of Tim Walker. No, I can remember seeing.
We're like in minute 2 of the podcast, and Tim's like, "Fuck you, Bryan."
I mean, I think you mean "fuck you, Leslie." George.
Man, let's just move forward.
No, as a kid, I can remember seeing George the Animal Steele, Backlund, Bruno, Jay Strongbow, Billy White Wolf.
Would Bruno have been the champion at this particular time? First of all, it was WWF you were watching.
Right. That was the only thing that was available at that time. And we had the black and white television and the rabbit ears. And,
sure.
That sort of thing. But, yes, I think Bruno was the champion. And then when I was a little bit older, then it switched hands to Superstar Graham. Mm-hmm. And then as I got a little bit older, Bob Backlund was champion. And that's when my parents felt comfortable taking me to wrestling events. Mm-hmm. So we started to go to wrestling probably in the late 70s when Backlund was the champion. I can remember the very first wrestling event that I went to. It was in a small town in Pennsylvania, and Chief Jay Strongbow and Swede Hansen, that was the main event. Yeah, it had Dominic DeNucci and Cowboy Bob Duncombe and the Valiants and the Iron Sheik, DiBiase, Santana, people like that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Did you ever get a chance to meet Bob Backlund?
Yes. Several times.
Really?
Yes.
Who's the coolest guy you ever got to meet?
The coolest guy I ever got to meet.
Not excluding us. I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings.
That's a pretty long list you got to thumb through there.
Yeah.
It is, but to me personally, the person I really kind of got that notion of being a little bit starstruck around, it was Bruno Sammartino.
Yeah.
Because I thought back, this is somebody from my dad's era. My dad loved Bruno, and he loved George Steele, and he loved Backlund, those sorts of guys. And I actually am in a locker room standing there talking to Bruno Sammartino. So that's
cool.
That was a really neat moment that I remember for a long time.
Was that back in the day when he was still wrestling, or was this after he had already, was this an appearance, or was he actually still active at the time?
Well, he wasn't active. He actually was at a big card in Pittsburgh where there's a small town outside of Pittsburgh, and it was Bruno Sammartino Day, and they brought him in, and I think Lord Zoltan wrestled Larry Zbyszko, and I think Bruno was in one corner, and Dominic Danucci was in the other corner.
Oh, neat.
And they had a match. It was kind of neat. Yes,
That's cool.
Yeah, Zoltan just did anybody see the video that Zoltan posted the other day on Facebook? His name is Ken Jugan, and it was from an old WWF match. It was he, his tag team partner, a handicap match against Andre the Giant.
I did see. I've seen that before.
Yeah.
It was him and Angelo Gomez.
Angelo Gomez. That's exactly what it was. I think it was one of those. You know how Facebook will be like, 4 years ago today you did this. Do you want to share it? So he shared the memory of, I guess, whenever he originally posted it, and I must have missed it the first time through. I don't know, Jake and Jeff, you guys have ever met Zoltan or?
I was on a show with him 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, but
CBW.
I've been in a locker room with him plenty of times. A tag team against him. And he does. He's got two sons that are deaf, and he runs a Deaf Wrestle Fest. And he just Cauliflower
Super
Alley
nice guy.
super cool guy.
Oh, super
and he's a legend in Pittsburgh. I mean, he really is maybe not Bruno Sammartino legend, but he's a big deal over there, and it just one of the nicest guys. But you mentioned his name. I just want to throw that video out.
And speaking of him, he started out as a photographer.
Is that right?
Yeah, he started out as a photographer. You can see some of his work in some of the event programs.
Wow.
Like if you go to the Baltimore Arena and you'd see Bruno's picture on the cover or George Steele's picture on the cover,
wow.
and you'd page through it and see everybody's picture. He, in the mid-'70s and late '70s, he did a lot of that work.
That's really cool.
And then
How did you get into the business with being a photographer?
Was the actual photography stemmed to be a part of the business, to go to the shows and just do it, or did you have other ventures in photography before you started going,
That's a bit of a long story, but I guess we got some time.
As long as it's interesting, we're just going to cut you off.
Well, I
If
always
Tate reaches for the pause button, you know it's time to change topics.
I always liked the wrestling magazines when I was growing up, so I'd read them, and we'd go to the newsstand every week and get some new magazines, that sort of thing. And my dad took me to the matches one night, and he said, "Why don't you write a correspondence report for the wrestler?" And he said, "Send it in, see if you can get it published." And so I said, okay. So I wrote an article, and then about 3 months later, I opened a wrestling magazine, and there's my name in print. And I was like, this is kind of neat. So I kept doing it, and I kept contributing, and I kept calling in results to the magazine, kept writing. It was more writing at that point because it was very early 1980s. And really everything was done by, you just wrote stuff on a piece of paper, and you popped it in the mail. It wasn't like...
Right.
You can just email them or fax them or anything like that. You actually sat down with a piece of paper and a pen, and you wrote out a little story and sent it to them. And it ended up being published. So I kept doing that. And eventually, as time went on, I got to interact with Bill Apter a little bit, and I was at an event, and I wrote something up for it, and he was very interested in the article. And he said, "Do you have any pictures to go along with it?" And I said, "No, I'm sorry. I just, I don't have anything to go along with it. I just wrote it up." And so Bill said, "Why don't you start taking a camera with you to the shows and take some pictures? Because I like your work, I like your writing, but we really need some pictures to back it up in order to get it published. And so that really was my...
So were the articles on particular guys, or were they results from events you went to? Or
It was basically like a synopsis of a match and then the results.
Right.
They used to run in the Wrestler and Inside Wrestling, and then later PWI had like the results columns, that sort of thing. So
awesome.
We did that, and then we just went on from there. That's how I got my foot in the door with the magazine.
Now these, because I'm like you. I mean, that was so much of my introduction to a lot of folks before we started getting NWA and like Superstation and stuff like that. Georgia Championship Wrestling was from the magazines. We always had the WWF or WWF as it would become, but we didn't have those others. But like, you know, that was my introduction to a lot of people, was through the magazines. So you had Inside Wrestling, you had the Wrestler, you had Pro Wrestling Illustrated. Are these? They're all kind of the same companies, sort of, right? That produces these.
They are.
magazines.
They're produced by the same company, and they had a few other titles too, like Sports Review Wrestling. Then they had like some quarterly magazines that they would put out. But basically, during the heyday, it was one magazine put out every week. Mm-hmm. There are 4 magazines, four weeks in a month. Mm-hmm. So usually, like every Monday, you go to the newsstand and you see a new magazine.
Yeah. And I always thought that the PWI was sort of the king of those. Probably because of the big fold out in the middle. You know, it had the big. And I always thought that was the coolest of them all. But.
Well, that really was the first magazine to introduce color pictures to the genre, and then some of the other magazines like Wrestling World, and they decided that they wanted to jump in and add color to their magazines, and they were actually doing almost full magazines in color, and then the Wrestler and Inside Wrestling and PWI really had to catch up. But they really had an advantage over some of the competitors because the company that produced the magazines actually owned their own printing company.
I see.
And that was one of the reasons why it took them a little while to get caught up with the other magazines in color, because they had all this paper stock that they could print black and white stuff on, but they had to order different stock in order to print color magazines. So they wanted to go through all their reserves of paper before they decided to go all color.
When you said, though, before about how he liked your writing and told you to take a camera, I wonder how many other people, and maybe you know, but how many other people were in that same boat as you? Somebody that really, really loved it and then were taking that initiative, because I always thought, just when we were growing up, when we were teenagers, like the wrestling world, I remember it being a little more like glossy, but I always thought it felt a lot more surface. There wasn't much to it in terms of the in-depthness to it, I guess is the way to put it, because PWI and Inside Wrestling and the Wrestler, I thought there just seemed like you were going a little deeper down the rabbit hole with it. Like you could tell there was more there to ingest. I mean, did you think that at all? I mean, were there other people that contributed to the magazine that maybe you met and kind of came from a similar situation as you, like people that were submitting to it and just loved it first and then started getting into it?
Hey, one of my close friends, Harry Burkett, who was at one time the editor for Pro Wrestling Illustrated. It's kind of like how he started out as well. He liked to write, and he submitted something to PWI as a writing sample, and they were interested. He'd also written for other magazines like health magazines and that sort of thing, so it kind of was a natural fit for him as well.
Cool. Now, when you show up, Bill Apter gives you this advice, great advice. I mean, at this time, so you're showing up now with a 35mm camera. When do you start getting... How far do you get into before you start having professional photography equipment? Because, I mean, was that right away?
Oh, right away. When Bill told me that, I thought, we can't fool around with, just a point-and-shoot camera. We have to get ourselves a professional camera if we want to get our work published. So,
did you ever have any interest in photography prior to that?
No.
Really? So that's what kicked it off, huh?
That really was, yeah. It it was kind of the bug. So,
how do you go from being the fan in the stand that's writing the article and taking the pictures even with professional stuff to being the guy at ringside and inside the guardrail? Because that's where you ended up. I mean, if you look on WWE DVDs to this day, you can see you out there.
We sit there watching the network at 2 in the morning. And I'm like, what is Tim Walker?
Oh, that's true. The network. Some
A lot of the ECW
people are like, what's a
stuff.
DVD?
Yeah.
But so when did that transition happen? How did that come about?
Well, that's a good question too. Hang on. Put that on pause. That's a real good question. I had some friends that were in the wrestling business. Ed Zahn, who promoted shows in South Central Pennsylvania, probably was my contact at first. And he had done some photography for the magazines as well. And he had moved on to becoming an event coordinator and a promoter on his own. And he worked with Max Thrasher in South Central Pennsylvania, running the Atlantic Wrestling Federation, to a good degree of success. They ran some big cards with Bam Bam Bigelow and Don Morocco and did some really good crowds around York, Pennsylvania. Anyway, Ed was working with some people in New Jersey, and I was hanging out in New Jersey at the Monster Factory in the old Clementon Coliseum, which is a great building for wrestling. It's an old warehouse that had a real high ceiling, and it was just an excellent spot for wrestling. But that's where I got to meet Larry Sharp. And Larry let me shoot ringside, and that's where I started, there at the Monster Factory in New Jersey. And then I got to meet Dennis Carluzzo, and of course, Ed continued to run some events in Pennsylvania, so I just kept networking and kept meeting more and more people. And Bill was very helpful also. If I wanted to go to an event, Bill would kind of grease the wheels a little bit for me and help me out that way.
So was there any kind of, obviously there's exposure to their product from you. I mean, did that help as well too? While you're taking pictures, you're basically being the historian of this event. You're going to, do the synopsis. Is that kind of, was that a key factor in this whole process too?
Well, at that point too, the magazines carried a lot of weight as far as publicity and the ability to make stars out of people, and the more press you got, a lot of times that equivocated with how many bookings you got, and how successful you were with getting into new promotions and that sort of thing. Plus, everybody likes to see themselves in print. So
people wanted you at ringside as much as possible.
Oh yeah, and I was real
Much like today.
Yeah.
I was real fortunate too, because right off the bat with Larry, he was promoting a show with Jerry the King Lawler and Abdul the Butcher. One of the very few times the two have ever wrestled, and that was the main event of one of the first shows that I ever got to shoot ringside with. So that kind of made a splash, and Buddha Singh, who would later become Balls Mahoney in ECW, he had a feud with Abdul the Butcher there in Clementon then, and as a matter of fact, one of the most horrific incidents ever that I've ever seen was a night when he blew fire, and instead of blowing it upward toward the ceiling, it actually blew out, and it hit Abdul the Butcher square in the chest. And Abdul the Butcher was burned, third-degree burns. His chest looked like it was a candle with it looked like a melting candle.
Was that the promo pic that he had where it looks like he's just got that discoloration with the sins on his chest?
Yes,
you were there?
Yes.
Did you take that picture?
Yes. I was
wow, you were the one who took
I was the only photographer there that night.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
Yeah.
I've seen that picture all over the place.
I had no
for
idea it was
years and
yours.
years. I mean, it's been probably 20 years I've seen it everywhere.
Yeah, that was right when I started, so I kind of got off onto a good foot right there.
And it only took third-degree burns.
Well, I mean, truly, it's a happy accident. But if somebody's not there to record that,
Yeah,
there's a moment in history that's not there.
It was a real historic moment that I was just lucky enough to be there. It was unfortunate, but nonetheless.
If it had to happen, it's because you caught it. And he's profited by it.
Well, sure. I was going to say, I mean, actually, it's the injury occurred, but I'm sure that Abdullah benefited from that down the road, and just
He's probably had that on every gimmick table he's had in the last
It was
20 years.
incredible. It really was. It was the smell of burning flesh, just the shock of it all. At first, it was like, oh my God, did I just see that? And then Abdul still wrestled like about 8 minutes after that.
So, but to have the wherewithal, because I mean, you're a fan, you're a photographer. I would think sometime for me, like, you know, the holy shit moments, like, you know, because you've got to be still the photographer for these holy shit moments. Have you ever lost any of them? Because
have you ever found yourself looking over your camera and the camera's starting to go down as you're watching it yourself?
Well, if I see people actually really sustain some really bad injuries, that sort of thing, I try and be tasteful with, you know, what kind of picture I was taking. But I knew at that moment, with this fire incident, that somebody had to record it just for posterity's sake.
If nothing else, to show the doctors when he goes to the hospital.
Well, he continued to wrestle for about 8 minutes afterwards. I mean, they continued. They started the match right after that and wrestled a whole match. And
did he kick the shit out of him for that?
I've never seen a more brutal elbow smash end a match. You know, Abdul Butcher comes off the ropes with that big elbow.
And he was more athletic at that particular time than...
That was around 1994. Yeah. It wasn't at the height of his athleticism,
like
but he's certainly getting around a lot better than what he does now. And I'll tell you what, that elbow looked damn wicked.
Yeah,
I wouldn't want to have been laying on the mat there and having him drop that elbow on me.
We were on our third show. We had Tommy Dreamer there, and he didn't know us. You know, it's the first time we had met him in that context. He did the show, and, you know, he was really nice, but, you know, he's kind of dry, and if you don't know him, he was kind of almost seemed standoffish. And he was just kind of like, yeah, no, I'm glad to be here, this and that. And then you walked in and he went, the hell are you doing here, Tim? And I just remember him doing that and, like, looking over and like, oh, and then he leaned over to me after you said it. He goes, don't ask him about the night at ECW Arena. Like that. And so, I'd asked you before, but I thought maybe you could give us the rundown.
That was my second experience with fire in wrestling. And it was about a year later, after that incident with Abdul the Butcher in Clementon. About a year later, it was at ECW, and that was a night that I probably won't forget for a long, long time. Of course, ECW Arena, it probably should have sat probably 750, 800 people at the maximum, and they were crowding in 1,000, maybe a little bit over 1,000. So it was always packed, and it was tight around the ring, and you had a lot of photographers. This is when magazines were still in their heyday. They were selling all kinds of magazines left and right, and you had folks from Gong magazine in Japan. You had folks from Mexico. It was 16 or 17 guys with cameras outside the ring. It was way, way, way too many people outside the ring. So it was always chaos. But this was probably in like September of 95, and it was a crazy night. It was just chaotic. I just remember you never knew what to expect when you went there, because Paul would always kind of pull some kind of surprise, and there was always this weird element of danger there. You could always feel it in the air, like something crazy could happen, because the fans were crazy. You go out in the parking lot, and I went out in the parking lot one night, and there's a guy with a knife cutting up his arm. You know,
his own arm?
Yeah, his own arm. He had a knife, and he's cutting up his arm and screaming, ECW, ECW. So you really had no idea what was going to happen inside the building, much less what's going on outside the building. So that night, it happened to be Tommy Dreamer and Terry Funk. They were a tag team, and they were wrestling Raven and Cactus Jack. And that was when Cactus Jack...
What could go wrong there?
Well, everything kind of went wrong there that night. It was just... It was all chaos, and Cactus was doing this great character where he was anti-hardcore, and he would put people in a chin lock and just hold them in a chin lock. And people would just go crazy over this. And Cactus being hated by the fans, that was kind of a new phenomena too. And being aligned with Raven, it was just was very fresh and very, very heated.
This would have been around the time, like with the Kane Dewey promos and stuff like that, where
yes.
he was talking about how
exactly
He was wearing the Bischoff shirt. And,
he was making that turn then. Yes, and about like 6 or 7 months later, he would go to WWE.
Yeah.
But it was a night in September of '95, and somehow Terry Funk got dumped out of the ring and ended up going back to the locker room, and then he returned to the ring then a little bit later. I could hear the crowd buzz. I could just hear it just like buzz. It was just, you could just hear the whole crowd was just buzzing. And I was like, well, what is going on? Because I'm at the ring, and the locker room's behind me, so I really can't see what's going on behind me. And there's so much going on in front of me that I really can't turn around to see what's going on behind me. And I hear this buzzing, and I'm like, well, I wonder what's going on. And so I happened to look up at the ceiling. Just something caught my eye, and I looked up at the ceiling for a second, and then I could see it. I could see the reflection of the flames on the tin roof. Yeah, and I was like, oh, damn. And I put 2 and 2 together, and I was like, Terry's got the branding iron, and it's on fire.
That's a quick math lesson there.
Well, I figured out that's what was going on, and I thought, oh, my God, this place is so packed. What am I going to do if he comes towards me?
Self-preservation kicks in at that point.
Definitely, because after that incident with Abdul the Butcher and the fire, I'm kind of leery of the situation. So there's a chair that Cactus has in the ring, and there's it's a plastic folding chair, and there's a towel wrapped around the plastic folding chair. The chair's all folded up, and there's a towel wrapped around and tied to the chair. And I think Cactus puts lighter fluid on the chair. And then Terry puts the branding iron on that towel. And I remember them hitting each other with this chair that's on fire. And I'm like, oh my God, this is just too much. And due to the fact that they put so much lighter fluid on that towel, the flames are shooting off that towel, and you have a plastic chair. Well, the plastic chair is melting in Cactus's hands. And so the chair's contracting. And, of course, the towel was tied to the chair. So the towel is now loose. And so when Cactus went to hit somebody with the chair, the towel went flying into the air and landed on Funk's back.
On fire.
On fire.
Oh, my God.
And he was on the floor at ringside, so he had no idea what was going on inside the ring. He was in a big brawl outside the ring, and it comes down and lands right on his back. And
what are the odds? That whole place.
It is just mayhem at that point. And then the lights go out in the building.
What?
The building went completely dark because they had done angles before where the lights went out and some mystery person would come and appear in the ring. Yeah. So this was kind of par for the course. It's something that you would see done every once in a while.
Okay.
And the lights go out. So everyone's panicked. They see and the towel's on the floor. The flames are flying up from it. The lights go out. They have Tommy Dreamer's up on the upper deck of the building being crucified or whatever's going on up there, and they have a light on Tommy Dreamer, but the rest of the building is entirely blacked out. So the fans, in their infinite wisdom, decide they want to put the fire out, but they're going to smother the fire with their chairs. So in the dark, everyone starts picking up their chairs and throwing it toward the ring at this towel.
Man.
And I can hear chairs going plunk, plunk, plunk all around me. And I'm like, dear God, where do I go? The lights are out. I can't see anything. And
in the most dangerous arena in the world at the time.
It's so crowded. It's so hectic. I had no idea. It was so dark. Because when they darkened that arena out, it was dark.
Now,
Before I know it.
Is Terry still under the fire on the floor?
No, I think the towel fell off of his back at that point. But there's so much going on, it's hard to take it all in. And really, I'm so worried about just getting away
surviving
from the situation. I don't want to get hit with a chair. And I'm like, with the fire going on outside the ring, I'm thinking it's not a good idea to crawl under the ring at this point, because that's the most flammable thing around is the ring with the boards and the plastic and all that sort of thing. So I'm like, nah, it's not a good idea to try and get under the ring, but I don't want to get hit with these chairs. And it's just chaos going all on around me. Then all of a sudden, Ubaz, Pablo Marquez, comes out with a fire extinguisher, a dry chem fire extinguisher. And so I see him, because he's real close to me, I can see him pull the pin on the dry chem fire extinguisher, but obviously he didn't know how to operate the fire extinguisher, and chem just flies everywhere, including in my eyes. If it couldn't get worse. And, of course, the dry chem's in my throat. I'm coughing. Man. I can't see. It's dark. So I finally am able to reach out, and I can feel the security railing off to my right-hand side. So I get my hand around the security railing, and I just run all the way back to the locker room. So I thought I was safe. That's a terrible, terrible mistake to make. I wasn't safe inside the arena, and I wasn't safe outside in the locker room. Once I get back to the locker room, I thought I'd be safe and sound, but that was far from the case. I get back in the locker room, and there's a small staircase that would lead to the second landing of the arena back there. And as soon as I step through the curtain, I see everybody from the locker room, with the exception of 2 people, are stuffed onto this small staircase, trying to get themselves up the staircase as far as they can. Everybody's crowded on the staircase trying to go up, and there's no more room on the staircase. Everybody from the entire locker room, production staff, wrestlers, Paul, the valets, everybody, the nurses, the doctors, everybody is on that staircase. And I look to my right-hand side, and there's Terry Funk and me. We are the only 2 people that are on the floor, on the regular floor of the locker room. And Terry is screaming like a wounded wild animal. Just screaming at the top of his lungs. And he's throwing whatever he can grab, he is just throwing everywhere. And obviously, everyone's scared to death of what's going to happen, because they're all in that staircase. And I'm the only one on the floor then. And so I decide I better join everybody else and try and get up this damn staircase. So Axel Rotten and I are the last 2 people on the staircase. And we're like looking at each other like, what the hell are we going to do? Terry Funk is screaming crazy. Ah! Just like nuts like that. Terry Funk picks up an oscillating fan that's taller than I am and lifts it over his head and throws it toward the staircase. And puts a huge hole in the wall about 6 inches to a foot from where I am standing. Needless to say, I'm thinking, I'm in the wrong place here, too.
Yeah. So there's, 20 or 30 guys crowding the staircase, and The reason they're there is they're trying to escape the wrath of Terry Funk.
Yes.
And that's not enough because he's throwing shit at them.
Yes, exactly.
In case you're just joining us.
And there's nowhere to go. So, at that point, once that fan smashes into the wall and makes a big hole in the wall right next to me, I'm thinking, I got to get out of here too. This is not the place to be. So,
can I ask real quick? Did you notice when he was in there? Was his back burned really badly?
His back wasn't to me.
Okay.
I was looking at him like I'm looking at you, like
right.
Like I was looking at him.
But that was
in
the assumption
eye.
of why he was acting so outrageous.
He sounded like a wounded animal to me, and I had seen the fire on his back out in the arena, so
Sure.
I had assumed that he was
safe
burned
assumption,
and hurt and just crazy, reacting. You know, like people react like when they're on fire, they don't know what to do.
Yeah.
It might have been shock or anything.
Yeah, it's just like, how many times do you see like people will say stop, drop, and roll, and how many times do people do it?
Yeah.
Because they're just so
Last thing in your
overcome.
mind,
Yeah, they're just out of their minds. So, at that point, I run back out into the arena where the lights have come back on, and almost the whole crowd has gone out into the parking lot. There's still some people wandering around, and there's all kinds of dry chem in the air, and it's just, and there's hardly a chair standing up in the place. It's just all chaos, and you can hear sirens in the background, and I'm thinking, oh, there's ambulance and police coming, and one of the fans that was still inside the building, I look over at him and I see him, and his nose is like pushed the whole way over onto his face. So, putting two and two together, I was like, this guy was at ringside, and he got hit with one of the chairs when the fans were throwing it in the dark.
Yeah.
I mean, what kind of chance? You're in complete darkness, and there's chairs flying everywhere.
Yeah.
How do you even duck? You don't even know what's coming at
It's
you.
amazing there wasn't more people laying around with injuries and stuff.
Oh, it was a nightmare. And there were people gathered outside in the parking lot. It was just confusion, chaos, people everywhere. And I heard the sirens, and it was craziness. And I heard people yelling at the concessions workers to get bags of ice, and
Wow.
I was like, oh, this is crazy.
It's a hell of a story.
And I gathered up two of my friends that came with me and
Got the hell out of Dodge.
got out, yes. But it was hard to even get out because people were just mulling all over the streets, and it was just such a chaotic situation. But I just knew I just wanted to get away from it all because...
Did you ever go back to work there?
Oh, yeah. That's the crazy part. People ask me that all the time. Did you go back? And they said, if that would have happened to me, they said, I would have never gone back. And I was like, yeah, I was back there in 3 weeks.
That's the story. I remember Ric Flair and Joey Styles talking about it, and I thought they said it was the September to remember, which followed the October to forget, or whatever, or something like that. But there was, I guess that they destroyed the videotape of that because there was lawsuits and there was
a lot of controversy regarding that, and mysteriously something happened to the tape.
I'll bet it's out there somewhere. Somebody somewhere.
Do you still have photos of the match up until that point?
Yes.
Are you keeping them under lock and key? Because I'd imagine somebody probably wants some torches as well. Either that or a pretty penny on the price tag on them.
I sent them to the magazine, so I don't know what happened to them now, but I know I had them back then. So
Not to jump topics too much, but you said about how there was like 16 or 17 photographers around the ring. In those situations, in that arena in particular, but other places where there's a lot of photographers, do you find yourself having to kind of elbow your way into getting the shot? Like, I know there's only so many best angle you can have for a certain move or something, and I'm sure everybody's trying to get from that point. Do you find yourself either getting bum rushed and elbowed yourself, or do you find you need to get in there and
Or is there an honor among thieves kind of a thing where there's a certain...
Hell no. This was like roller derby outside the ring. With that many people outside the ring, I usually have my little sweet spot that I like to be in, and it was in the one corner of the ring, and I wouldn't move a lot from there because it was so crowded, And if you just take your time, usually the shots will come back to you.
Yeah.
If you keep moving around trying to fight with everybody, it's usually you end up missing, something that you should have gotten, you end up missing. So I usually try to stay there, but I did have a couple of the foreign press guys like to throw their elbows around a little bit at me sometimes. And so I ended up getting one of the guys that liked to throw elbows a lot. I was standing here, and he was standing to my left, and then the ring post was to his left. So he was in between me and the ring post. Well, he threw one too many elbows one night, and he ended up getting crushed between me and the ring post.
That's good stuff.
Yeah, I don't remember a whole lot of him throwing elbows at me anymore after that.
When you got here, we were kicking around just talking about independent wrestling in general. I guess before we even get to that question, I wanted to ask you, because you came in on our very second show, which would have been 2009.
Yeah.
June of 2009. I was just curious as to what you remember surrounding that.
Well, before we get into that, working for the magazines, I always liked to do something different. I didn't want to do what everybody else was doing. I didn't want to do WWE. I didn't want to do what was popular at that point. I wanted to make my own niche. I wanted to have my own personality. I wanted to do my own thing that was a little bit different from everybody else.
Cool.
So that's kind of why I gravitated towards independence. And I thought there were a lot of good human interest stories on the independents. A lot of unique characters. A lot of people who truly loved wrestling themselves, and that's why they wanted to get into it. They weren't into it necessarily for the money or the fame. They loved wrestling just like I did, and that's what I wanted to cover. And fortunately for me, there was a void at the magazine where no one really knew a lot about independent wrestling at that point. Independent wrestling was not in vogue like it is now. It was kind of like an underground type thing. And that was my interest. I wanted to bring some personality. I wanted to bring some publicity to it. I wanted people to know that independent wrestling was worth their time and attention. So that was really that's what I liked to do then when I was doing the photography.
And that was probably somewhat in the era of the transition from the territories to independent league. The upstart independent leagues that took the place of the territories as Vince, closed each one down or whatever.
I was real lucky because I was able to catch the end of that territorial era. I was really a big fan of Smoky Mountain Wrestling, and I had friends down in Knoxville who'd actually, every 6 or 8 weeks, they'd send me tapes of the weekly television shows, and then I would, for the big cards, I'd take the trip down 81 to Knoxville and Johnson City and that sort of thing, and I got to shoot pictures at ringside for Smoky Mountain.
Nice.
And some people will call me and say, I saw you on the network. You were on Smoky Mountain. I saw, they just crushed Boots the Cat in the ring, and there you are taking pictures of it. So
That's
Yeah,
cool.
and I definitely I saw you in Hamburg, Pennsylvania. The show was in Hamburg. I saw you on the network
from ECW.
From ECW, it was the I feel like it might have been Jericho and Foley working each other.
Was it Sabu and,
Might have been Sabu.
and Cactus?
Might have been
The night that Sabu hit
the
Cactus.
bottle that
with
would
the
not
bottle
break.
would not break, yes.
yes.
Mm-hmm.
The clunk.
Yes.
Yes.
And I was right there, yes.
Yeah.
That was the night I got hit with a chair, too, yes.
I remember a number of years ago you were on, I think it was like an internet show or a podcast, but you had said that you thought Dick Karakoff was a real pioneer of the Mid-Atlantic. And I was wondering, at that time, like, how much work did you do there? Like, did you guys kind of intersect when he was really starting to run? Or how far into his run did you kind of arrive on the scene and cover his stuff in particular?
Well, Dick was very nice to me, too. Yes. I heard about Dick through other fans, actually. There was a whole network of fans who would go to independent cards. Some would go to cards in New Jersey, like I would go to see Larry Sharp and Dennis Carluzzo. Some would go down here to Virginia to see VWA with Mr. Lehigh. And somehow we'd all probably end up in the middle here, meeting in Baltimore or Hagerstown or one of those spots. And they told me about Dick running cards, and somehow I called Dick and ended up going to see some of his events, and then ended up doing some photography for him as well, too. That was the era when Neil was the champion, and he was using people like King Kong Bundy and Nikolai Volkov and Big John Studd. I saw Big John Studd wrestle Ivan Koloff on one of his cards,
Wow.
and I got to go to Hagerstown one night at the fairgrounds and see Ricky Morton and John Studd wrestle Afonseca.
Wow.
Yeah, that was kind of neat. That was probably around 88 or 89, because WWF had just been there the month before with the Twin Towers. I think they wrestled the Rockers, or Twin Towers wrestled...
I don't know, we saw in
Somebody-
89,
that's-
it was Demolition against the Twin
Was it
Towers.
that may have been the same event. And then after the WWF card, Dick had people out handing out flyers and that sort of thing. And I picked up a flyer and went to see that. I was lucky. I got to see a lot of big matches during that period of time too. I got to see Bruiser Brody and Abdul the Butcher in Shippensburg one night. That was a lot of fun. Yeah, not a lot of people
That's
there,
awesome.
but it was pretty awesome to see. They brought up into the stands. They went all the way to the top of the stands, and Bruiser Brody hit every step on the way down as he fell. Bam, bam.
Was that the only
bam.
time you were witnessed Brody in a match, or was that something you got to see, fairly regular, or?
I didn't get to see a lot of Brody, but I think I saw him several times. Sometimes he'd wrestle for NWF. He was a regular there, off and on. Jules Strongbow, DC Drake, Larry Winters, guys like that. Back in that time frame, probably about 86, I would guess, if my memory serves me correctly. I've got to see a lot of stuff over the years. I've got to see Lawler wrestle Dusty Rhodes twice, and I think they only wrestled a handful of times in their whole careers. I got to see Lawler and Bill Dundee wrestle. That was kind of neat. Just a lot of cool historic
That's cool.
stuff over the years. Yeah.
You said about how cool San Martino was. Who now, like in your recent career being at shows, do you ever get starstruck by seeing somebody? I mean, I remember a few years ago seeing like the pictures you took somewhere. I'm not sure exactly where it was, where like Hogan and Piper were staring eye to eye in the ring, and just a lot of time, and Flair and Sting and so many other guys that you've been ringside for. Is there anybody in recent memory that you cross paths that you actually get starstruck by, or is you kind of numb to that part of it? Because I know as a wrestler, you almost, it's still cool to see guys, especially guys you grew up watching, things like that, but you almost get so used to it that you're not allowed to be a fan anymore, and you almost get into it, being part of the job, you know what I mean?
I think it's that, but I also think that no matter how good somebody is, once they come after you're not a kid anymore, no matter how good a guy like Roman Reigns is, who I think is really good, I'm never going to look at him the way I might have looked at Hulk Hogan or Ric Flair, because I was a kid when I liked them. And so I don't know that you can be, what do you think? Can you be starstruck by people that are a generation or two under you? You know what I mean? I don't know. I just don't think you look at them initially the same way.
I think I would agree with that. I don't think you're ever going to put somebody, especially when you become older than the people
Right,
that you're
right.
watching. It does change a little bit. You can still have the appreciation for it and everything like that, but they're not the ones that made you fall in love with it. They're not the ones that brought you into it. But I get where you're coming from, but Tim definitely popped for that Hulk Hogan Piper thing. So is there a story behind that? Because you look like you really.
Well, I wouldn't say that I was necessarily starstruck, but I knew that it was something important. Mm-hmm. I knew that it was something I wanted to be there for. I knew it was a neat moment. I knew it was, and that's what it's all about. It's about those moments, and I knew instantly that was a moment.
Right.
And earlier in the day, Hogan had done an autograph signing at the baseball stadium, and it was really, really warm out.
Where's this at? Where is it?
This was in New York at Dutchess Stadium in Wappingers Falls, New York, right outside of Fishkill, close to Poughkeepsie.
Okay.
It was really, really warm. He had quite a long line of people, and he accommodated everybody. He was very, very good with the fans. But it was blistering hot. It was in August, toward the end of August. It was muggy, hot. And so I didn't spend a lot of time out there. I was kind of nestled away inside the locker room that had air conditioning and TV, and so I was inside watching TV a little bit, just taking it easy. And then all of a sudden, it was me and one of the referees. We were in the locker room. We were just chatting away about nothing in particular. And then Hogan just comes in out of nowhere, and we're like, "Oh, hey, how are you?" And he started talking to us about the craziest things. He starts telling us. It was about that time when his first contract with TNA was coming to an end. And he was in the middle of negotiating to re-up with TNA. And he was talking to us about how well his negotiations were going and how they were going back and forth. And he was leaning towards re-signing and this sort of thing. And this was like the big buzz about on the web and on the internet, that sort of thing. Was he going to sign? Wasn't he going to sign? And here he is giving us a scoop, the referee and I. It was just like he had known us his whole life. And he just like starts randomly talking to us like, I think I'm going to sign a contract with them, and I'll probably be there another 2 years at least. And things have been going pretty well with TNA at that point with him. And it was just so random. Just happened to be there, and he was just hot and wanted to come in and wash up and wash his face and get a little bit cleaned up, because he was sweaty from being out there in the heat and that sort of thing. So he would come in and get a drink every so often, and we were sitting in there for a couple hours, and we were the only ones to talk to.
Right place, right time.
Yeah, it was the right place, right time.
So to answer the question, it was kind of like, holy shit, there's Hulk Hogan. So at least for a second, or am I wrong?
It caught me by surprise that he was there. It's like I didn't expect him to come in, and I certainly didn't expect him to start hitting us up with a big conversation.
Have you ever had any interaction with him prior to that, or
just to say hi at a WCW show? So I got to shoot one of his matches with Sting in a cage in Baltimore. That was kind of fun.
Oh wow!
Yeah, that was at the height of the NWO thing. It was on all things. It was like on a Tuesday night, and it was completely sold out.
Was WCW just calling you up at random saying, "Hey, come on in," or did you have a contract with them?
No, it was me calling them. Uh-huh. And they had a really, really nice gentleman that worked in public relations. He would always be very, very accommodating, and
sure.
Yeah, it was very nice. And WCW always treated us very nice. They'd always send us our press passes ahead of time, and if it was close on time, they'd send you a FedEx package with your press pass in it. They'd bend over backwards. Yeah.
I'm sure that helped them too, because there was quality photos going on all the magazines and stuff. And WWF at the time had all the the WWE Spotlight magazine, the regular WWF magazine, and all that. So I'm sure they were trying to compete as much as possible without having to have their own magazine.
Yeah, they did. The guy that was in charge of their public relations, his name was Alan Sharp, and he was always very, very nice to me.
So on the independent stuff, because you said, that's one of the big things you wanted to cover. From then till now, what are some of the things that you really like about independent wrestling now, and what are some of the things that you don't care for about independent wrestling? Like, what do you think the best stuff is about it, and what do you think? Are there any trends or anything you don't particularly like about it, or things you think should be better?
I do know one. It's way too many matches.
That's true. There is a real tendency for cards to be overbooked, I think, today.
We've talked about this multiple times, you and I have.
I think six good matches is better than 8 mediocre matches any day of the week. And I think if you have the talent that can go 6 really good matches, that's the way to go. I think the crowd gets so worn out sometimes from some of these really long events, and seeing the same thing over and over and over again, because you'll see a lot of the same wrestlers trained at the same school, so they have a lot of the same techniques. So you're watching a lot of the same things sometimes occur over and over and over again. So that's something that I'm not a particular fan of. Something else that I think is really a lost art is tag team wrestling. I think that's something that's going by the wayside. And to compliment you, I have to say
He's pointing to me.
Yes, I am. If you ever want to see a really good tag team wrestler, Leslie Leatherman is a really, really good tag team wrestler. His timing in tag team matches is damn near perfect.
Go on.
I'm turning to the janitor that says, I'm sitting tonight here.
Well, I thank you. I appreciate that. So,
Go on.
if you're a tag team partner of mine, you know that my timing usually is the hot tag.
No, but your timing and setting stuff up is very, very good as far as distracting referees and all the things that go along with a classic tag team match. And you've had various partners I've seen and done very, very good. Whether it's Jake or Gutter Boy or whomever, I think that's a lost art. And I've seen some of those tag team matches you had that were just, I thought, classic matches that I think anybody should watch, and anybody could watch, and anybody could enjoy.
Well, thank you. I do appreciate that.
You guys dating now? You guys talk about this ahead of time?
I told him he can have the chair.
Leatherman's putting his wallet away right now.
I told him we could have the chair.
Well, that's our podcast.
On that note.
And on a high note, I'll tell you what, I don't. I'm not going to ask you to call anybody out, but you've had to have seen some horrible things.
Whether that be matches or complete events, start to
horrible things too. Yeah.
Let the record show Tim has a look on his face like he's ready to vomit.
Is there anything that you would like to share from because there was
we don't have to name names.
There was that website like that Wrestle Crap, and there was stuff like that. I mean, because watching wrestling for 30 years and being at ringside for 20 or longer, you know, I mean, it's
23 years I've been doing photography. Yes.
So I mean, you've seen some great stuff. You've seen some historical
literally
stuff.
thousands and thousands of matches.
One of the worst things I think I've ever seen, and I think it was a card that you guys were on.
But right now, there's about 11 to 1,200 people that are listening to this.
Should we hit the pause button to make sure it's not about us?
All right, so who was Griffin wrestling?
Go on.
I won't mention names.
But you'll be able to figure it out.
I was going to say, if I can tell who you're talking about, I'm going to mention it.
Well, you may. That's
what we do here.
I'm chomping.
There's 11 or 1,200 people that listen to this each week right now, and they're all, in the moment they're listening to this, like, what's it going to be?
Okay. It was a match that the aftermath looked like somebody had driven their car and collided with a deer. And there was guts and blood and just, it was the most disgusting thing I've ever seen. And I was there when I saw Abdul the Butcher get burned, and I've seen some pretty gruesome things. Well, this almost made me throw up. It was that horrid.
I was there. I remember you coming over to me going, I literally think I'm going to puke.
Yes.
Like,
it was
there was nothing funny about it. You were like, this
is just, it was way too much.
This was a hardcore style match.
Yeah, it was just way. It was violence for the sake of violence. And really, you saw people grab their kids and run for the door.
Really?
Yeah. It just was unbelievable, really. And there was no excuse for it.
I wasn't there that night, but I do remember that
there's just no.
That is the best of it.
There's no reason for it at all. No reason for it at all. And I'll tell you what else. Sometimes the male violence against women gets a little bit too much. I was at another show, and it involved a very popular female wrestler. She wasn't wrestling that night. She was managing. And the babyface in this match decides to give her a DDT. And it gets a tremendous pop. Everybody's, you know. And I thought, well, not good, but, you know. Gets the bright idea. You got one pop out of it. Well, let's lift her up and do it a second time. Just absolutely uncalled for. Just to get that little, you know, it's just, to me, it was ridiculous. And where's the medevac helicopter to help her out? You know, there's nobody even helped her to the locker room. She just
sold away. So anybody that gets pinned by that same DDT now got lost to a move that a female valet took twice.
Yeah, but is there a reason to give a female valet a DDT? Couldn't you just turn her over your knee and spank her? Wouldn't that just...
I have to agree with you. I'm not a big fan of baby faces ever crossing that line.
Yeah.
You know, I always kind of like the cheap pop of the kiss. Ricky Morton did that in a match with us. We were wrestling up in Mount Savage, and they had, who was the manager they had with us? Jacob. They put a female manager with us, and Sassy was the name that she went by, and you know, she.
I never remember that.
Ricky did the gimmick where somebody shot him off the ropes. He ducked a clothesline. He slid under the bottom rope, just grabbed her, gave her a kiss, and then slid back in the ring, and she's all, and it's good, and it got just as good a reaction as the DDT spot probably did. You know what I mean?
Well, how about that Elite Pro show where Tommy Dreamer gave Casey Carlisle the pile driver while Rhino's cheering him on? I mean, maybe you weren't there. That explains why the pictures of it are so shitty.
I don't remember, but
well, if I were going to justify it, the one thing I would say is Casey's tougher than most people I know.
Oh, for sure.
And
She's a competitor.
And Casey's a wrestler. She's a badass, but it is what it is. But
I mean, you have to take it into context too. I mean, just at this point, in front of 50 people compared to there's just no point in it.
Yeah. So. Yeah. Have with all of your experience and seeing as many matches as you have and doing the indies, I mean, I imagine you've seen a ton of folks that now are on the big stage, WWE, on the way up. You also, as you talked earlier, have seen some folks on the way back down once they're no longer there, headlining cards hopefully to draw people in. Is there a couple of folks that, off the top of your head, that you saw when they were just green as could be, but you were like, man, oh man?
Doc. Very
Gallows,
first time. Yep. The very first time he stepped into a ring, I was like, wow. This guy's going to be in WWE someday. That was my first reaction when I first saw him. This guy's going to be in WWE. And then when I heard that he was in Tough Enough and something happened in Tough Enough and he didn't make it, I thought to myself, that's okay. He was going to make it. Yeah, I thought, what happened to him in Tough Enough? He tripped on the ropes or something?
Yeah, he wasn't used to the size of the ring, I believe, because he worked independent rings, and so I think he
And the rope ropes,
and the
because
rope,
someone springing.
ropes
jump into
versus
them.
the wire cage with fire hose over it that most of us got an induction
I heard there's
to.
a great story of Tim Walker and Luke Gallows hanging out in, was it Tennessee?
Pause.
I was going to say we don't pause that great story.
There was 40 minutes of laughter.
It was Tim, Luke, and Jack, I believe. Is that?
It was me.
And he means Daniels.
Daniels.
I believe.
Luke Gallows.
This is not something that's going to get Gallows fired, is it?
Years ago.
No.
Okay.
Years ago.
Crimson, I think, was there. Some really, really good wrestlers from Tennessee. Like there's a guy from Tennessee named Chris Michaels. He went by at the very end of Smoky Mountain. He was Comet Chris Michaels. I don't know if you know who he is. Excellent wrestler. Very good hand. Excellent. He's had some tremendous matches. I saw him have a match with Vordell Walker where they were working a spot where like they were twisting their fingers, and the crowd was just like going bananas over, somebody bending your finger back and you being in pain from it. And I was like, wow, that's just amazing to me. They're just so good. I think Chris Michaels was down there. And a few other assorted people who will.
To what incriminate?
Maybe Bodie Williams might have been there.
I think he may have been, because I think he's the one that texted me a picture.
I think...
that's about 3 phones ago, so this had to be at least 5 or 6 years ago, I would guess.
So they don't realize that I'm the one who's supposed to take the pictures. Yes, isn't that gimmick infringement?
It is.
Yeah. That's...
So what happened on this episode of When Photographers Go Wild? I'd like to know how this plays out. I don't know if I've heard the story. That's why I'm...
Well, we just ended up...
Was there some type of challenge? Is that what it was? Or
we ended up at some nice high-rise apartment.
I hear things. That's why I asked.
Yeah, we ended up at some nice high-rise apartment in Nashville. Somebody in the penthouse,
Of course you did. You're with Gallows.
Yeah,
he finds a way to.
Yeah, it's we're on the 40th floor in this penthouse where you have to get buzzed in, and you get in the elevator, and there aren't buttons on the elevator. The butler has to send you to the elevator. Correct floor. Yes, so we ended up there, and it's very unfortunate that by the time I got there, they had run out of beer. And so, I was a little bit thirsty, so decided to enjoy myself with a couple of adult beverages.
And
Crown.
Crown, that's what it was.
Yes. Well, let's put it this way. It's never a real good idea to drink a half a bottle of Crown in about 20 minutes.
No.
But if you're still standing after that, then you're doing good.
You weren't, as I remember.
Well, I was for quite a while. I walked on my own from there all the way to downtown Nashville after going into two different bars.
I only asked because the next morning I was talking to the kid on the phone, and he said, Tim Walker is a champion.
Well, I'll tell you what. After 2 different bars, I was still going, but I'll tell you what, it was a little bit slow go, and then I got up and I was sitting. My mistake was sitting down. That was my mistake. I sat down.
Yeah, that'll get you.
And then it really, then it got me, and then I decided
You sure it wasn't the 20-minute thing with the Crown Royal?
Well, it caught
He was
up.
sitting while he did it.
It caught up to me when I was sitting down.
That's You're elusive while you're on your feet.
I was good while I was on my feet, still moving around, yeah. But then I sat down, and then I decided to get up. And when I decided to get up, then I decided I was Ric Flair. And I took the face first.
Face first. Oh, no.
I just get up and go, boom!
Gravity was the real winner that night. You've all been there, right, Leatherman?
It was nice. Luke Gallows and Crimson helped pick me up, and they said, boy, this son of a gun is heavy, isn't he?
Gallows he's picked me up a few times as well too. After pulling shit off of me that I brought down with me. So.
I picked him up hundreds of times, so I think it all works out in the end.
But I made it back.
Highway code, it all works out in the end.
Here,
I made it back to the car. I mean, Bodie helped me out a little bit there, but I made it back to the car, and then on the way back, the guys that were driving, we had a designated driver that didn't have anything, so he was good, but he didn't know his way around town.
Makes it
and
even more interesting.
I'm in the back seat, and I kick open one eye, and I say, 1820 Briley Parkway. And everybody goes, what? 1820 Briley Parkway. That's the address to our hotel. I still had that together. And I was like, and out of my one eye, I said, oh, you go that way on 64, by the way. So.
Wow.
I knew where I wanted to be. And I was up the next morning eating breakfast at the hotel at 7 a.m.
You know what happened?
Without a headache, by the way. Without a headache.
He's dotting all the I's and crossing all the T's of this story.
It's the same story as ECW Arena, buddy. He just closed his eyes, he found that guardrail, and he just pulled himself.
No, the guy that we've been talking to for almost an hour and a half, that you guys have heard all these crazy stories and all these interactions with guys like Terry Funk and Mick Foley and
how
Hulk Hogan
awesome he thinks I am,
and
as
how
a
awesome,
tag team wrestler.
that too. That too. He's also been to. I'm trying to think. You may have missed a half dozen shows out of the last 50 shows we've run. I mean, you've been.
I hate to miss them.
But I mean, that's so amazing. You know, that a guy that's done all the things you do.
And I want to congratulate you all on putting out such a great product that you do, month in and month out. It's very consistent and very good. So I wouldn't take my time to come down here if I didn't think it was if I didn't think it was worth my time and effort. I wouldn't come down.
Thank you.
So I really, and you're one of the few ones that I do anymore. So there's just a handful because I only have so much time and I travel a lot for work, and it's not easy to make a lot of time to do independent events, but I like to make time out of my schedule to come down here because I know I'm going to see something noteworthy.
I appreciate that. A lot of times with the shows, we're all very busy running a show. And you'll come in and, we talk for a minute or two, but we don't get to just sit and go over it. I just thought if you could remember over the last, literally, 40-plus shows you've been to of ours, if there was anything that stood out, any memories, good or bad, and just anything in particular that you remember that stands out.
Leatherman being particularly an asshole a certain night or something. Because it happens. I've seen it.
Only on the days that end in wine, brother.
Hundreds of times.
I know you said earlier about how hot it was on the second show.
Oh my gosh, yeah, that's something I won't forget. I won't forget how hot and the amazing feat of pulling off this show at the college there in Kaiser right after your venue had burned down. And there's like mass chaos like in that week or so afterwards, and you're still able to pull it all together, change all your advertising, get everything together, secure a venue, and still run the show with ring. Tommy Dreamer.
Lost 2 rings in the fire, and 2 weeks later we had another ring.
That was amazing to me. That you that was composure and nerves of steel, really.
Card subject to change.
Yeah, but the card really didn't change; just the venue changed. Yeah. So that to me was a promoter's worst nightmare, and handled so well that I thought for sure when I heard that the building had burned down, well, the show is going to be canceled. But it was full on. You would have never known the difference. Mm-mm. It was, and that was a great event. I thought that ran smooth as silk. Other things that I can remember, I remember Jake and Vince Vega inside the steel cage at the Armory. I like that Armory. That Armory that was a great place. And I'll tell you what, you didn't have a lot of room for error because the people were right on top of the ring, right there, watching every single move you made.
Yeah.
You know, they were, and if you messed up, they were right on you. You know, so
Yeah.
I remember that.
Kudos to Vince on that one because that was about his maybe 7th match ever. He kind of got thrown in the deep end right out of the gate.
I'll tell you what, you've really produced some really nice talent too. Vince and Bodie come to mind just right off the bat, and now some of the newer talent. I like that Reggie Collins kid. I don't know if you like him, but
Well, his Facebook status, he's about to be approved for friendship again. So he's got that going for him. But
I think he's got a lot. I think he's got a lot of potential.
I'll tell you what, he's got a lot of heart. He's got a lot of heart, and he's surprised me that the bumps and stuff that he takes and everything like that. Not as surprised I am that I'm talking about him right now, but I'm surprised.
Tell you what, the kid's got a chop on him. He's got a heavy hand for not having much body weight to him. He can get some mustard on those chops. I mean, I would say they rival just about anybody in the organization.
Yeah. I think I felt one of those.
I felt a few of them in the Battle Royal last weekend.
I'll tell you what.
Did you get a couple in the Battle Royal? Oh boy!
And I know she's worked other places, and we couldn't take all the credit or anything, and wouldn't try to. But Tess Valentine is another person who's an upcomer who does a great job.
Great.
Somebody we will take the credit for, and that's Dalton Hayes, who I think does really good.
Oh, he had a great match with Brandon. A couple great matches with Brandon.
Yeah. I look at Anthony Adams. I think he's got was Tony Costello, and I mean he's one of the ones that I look at and I'm like, man, oh man, he just needs time, just needs ring time. And the more he gets of that, man, he just sky's the limit, I think.
There's a lot of good talent. I know I'm probably forgetting some.
Well, Danny DeVille, I think that when you're a female performer, there's a spotlight on you that's probably stronger than when you're a male performer, simply because a lot of times when you're going out there, any one of us, you can be in matches like battle royals or 6-man tags or things that can help hide your weaknesses while you learn the craft and get better and better. And when it comes to ladies wrestling, a lot of times there's one ladies match on the card. You know what I mean? You're not only...
It's a commodity for sure.
Yeah. You're thrust right there in the spotlight. And, I mean, I think it would be easy to... You couldn't blame somebody for going out there in their first or second or third wrestling match and it not being very good. And I think all of her matches have been pretty damn good.
And I think your point is that if you're a green guy and you go out there and you flub up, it still might get lost in the rest of the evening what's going on.
Yeah, sure.
But there's a little extra added pressure for a lady because it would be like that's the only ladies match that they're going to see.
It's that, and it's the idea that since there's so few ladies working, you're already at the top of the card in terms of the ladies division. Even, you being anybody, I think that a lot of times, women come in and they're wrestling for the number 2 contendership, number 1 contendership, championship match, and that's a lot of pressure.
I think the one thing about her that I would say is that maybe she needs to do something that nobody else does, just to catch everybody's attention, just to, Casey Carlisle does something nobody else does, that old school, her pacing, it's a little bit different from what everybody does. Tess does her athleticism and her flips and her gymnastics. That Muta elbow that she does in the corner is just fantastic. If she just had that one thing that was just different from everybody else.
Yeah, I see Danny as a little bit of like a...
But, she's just starting.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's still probably
like a shooter.
Doesn't match.
That's what I was thinking. Submission
like a shooter,
holds.
submission.
So I think you're onto something there.
I think that and having seen her work and what she does and everything, I just think that she will find her niche, and she'll make it her own.
I think that's a real good niche to go, like a UFC type, or maybe she can incorporate some judo throws,
she's
or some
definitely
karate,
established submission holds, but the way to
karate,
transition into them,
something a little bit,
something like that. I think it would just, but I agree with where she's at so far. She's leaps and bounds ahead of where she probably should be. I think she's so.
And where we were in our 10th, 12th match.
Where I am
now.
if that's amazing to think. It's only like 10 or 12 matches that she's had.
Yeah, maybe because she's branched out.
Yeah,
quite a
she's
bit,
worked
too.
a couple of matches, but I'd say it's still under 20.
20, yeah.
Total.
So,
I mean,
Still,
but she had probably 100 matches at the training center. So we that's one of the things that we've. It's a different can of worms, but when we were training, we were there all the time. We did everything we could to get our butts in there. If we had availability, if we were not at work, and we could get in that ring, we got in that ring, and that's the difference. 20 matches in front of a crowd, but she's got probably hundreds of ring hours in already.
I think that's something that's kind of a lost in translation for a lot of guys now, especially the younger guys that are coming up. Even if they have the talent there, it's so much easier to get noticed by WWE or some of these other organizations with the social media and with all it's so easy to send a link for something than it is to try to get a video camera set up and then put it on a tape and then take that tape and put it in an envelope and mail it and hope that somebody opens it instead of just throwing it in the garbage when it gets there. I mean, you can see on your computer if somebody opened an email, so you know that if they actually saw it. And this day and age, it seems like more people are, when we first started, you didn't even know where you could find the address to send something like that, or you had to show up at a building and hope you could sneak in the back door the way the kid did when he was first trying to get noticed.
Yep.
So he basically saw a door that people were going in and went in because he was a big guy and managed to get past a few levels of security to get a tape to the right hands. But now, I mean, it's not that hard. You can almost go online and type it in 2 minutes. You'll have an email or an address or something. It's so much easier now to get to the source you need to, but less people they want to do it, and then the passion thing and all the other, they want it, but they don't. How much do they really want it when they're not going after it? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, you tell a story to them about two guys working a finger, and I mean that's an art form, and that's not something that you get from being in the ring, 20 matches or that's or some guys that say I've been wrestling for 10 years. You've had 5 matches a year. You've had 50 matches. So
I think the biggest thing for a lot of guys is that they need to stop worrying about their highlight reel and show people what they can do bell to bell and get.
Well, look at Hulk Hogan.
Yeah.
Look at the reaction he gets when he cups his ear. Mm-hmm. Look at the reaction Sid gets when he's caught in a chin lock and he flexes his hand like that, and the whole crowd comes up with him. I mean, are guys trying too much stuff now? I mean, what do you think?
I think so. I mean, honestly, I think that.
Look at the Patriot on your cards.
By far, and this is I'm stealing a line from you. The greatest bargain in the independent wrestling is having the Patriot on your show.
Pound for pound and dollar for dollar, the best deal on the independent scene.
And he just puts on a show absolutely every time the crowd's right there in the palm of his hand.
And he has control of the crowd. The crowd doesn't control him. He controls the crowd.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not to say he doesn't work, because he works hard. I mean, you'll still see him,
I agree.
265, 70 pounds
I'd
throwing
like
a
to see him
standing
hit the
drop
gym,
kick.
but,
always shows up in shape and everything else. But yeah, I mean, I'm with you on that.
One of my favorite matches that
understanding
we've had,
how to use his ability and having the ability are two completely different things, I think.
one of my favorite matches that we've ever had on our shows, and he's kind of like you, Tim. He's probably been to as many shows as you have, working them and everything. And we appreciate both of you guys like crazy being there and making the product better. But with all the young guys that he's worked with and everything like that, I think my favorite match, he had that match with Gangrel and those guys. That's one of my favorite matches that we've ever had on one of our cards. I mean, they went out there and they tore it down. And I just... Yeah. Were you there for that one? Were you? I mean, I just thought it was...
I was there.
I love the... I just love the matchup. It was such a unique matchup, and it made sense because he had been feuding with Dr. Crane and every monster in Dr. Crane's stable that had been thrown, and Griffin and Man-Thing and Sinister Cross, and then Dr. Crane dug a little deeper in his purse and brought in this other. But I don't know. I thought it was a fantastic match. But you're right. It's that knowing what to do and that knowing I'm going to dictate what's going to happen here, and I'm going to get you, and you're going to talk to the crowd, and they're going to follow, and they're going to end up being there. And
how many times have you seen a Patriot have a bad match?
Never.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Never.
The when and the why is just as important as the what.
And you know what? And while we're on that topic, the nicest guy on the planet, always so generous with his time with all the young guys, and when we were young guys, and
everybody that has ever gone in the ring with him, immediately after you've gotten better. I noticed that when we were starting, and the first time I wrestled him was probably '99 at the Hot Dome in Fort Detrick, and you were there. You were ringside because I have some pictures that you took, and it was just like that was one of those first times where you felt like you were a superstar because you were in the ring with him, and he knew exactly how to utilize me and you because you were out there with me, and it was just like this. It's like I don't know how to put it into words, but it made you so much better immediately. Like you went from feeling like I can hit a lot of moves, I can do moves, I'm athletic, I can, I'm comfortable enough to execute maneuvers, but I just had a main event match, whether it was booked as a main event or not, because it was a stacked card, but it was just like, to this day, that stands the test of time, and I had probably only been working 9 months or a year maybe, and it's just like, I watch that now compared to any match I've ever had because it was so solid, and it was all him, you know.
I think that's part of Tim's point. Like when I watch a match like that, or the Rock and Roll Express match where I said that Ricky slid underneath and everything.
It was the night after that.
It was because they had the crowd so into it. It made it so easy. I mean, when we would do a double team move to the Patriot, he'd take the referee and I'd be on the outside, grab him by, it was simple stuff. It was all stuff that psychology wise, he was feeding to us. And you gave me a compliment earlier, and I greatly appreciated it. But I can't tell you how much stuff I got from working with him or working with Ricky and Robert. And all I'm doing is taking the philosophies and that they showed us, and then using that.
Tim gave me that look like I was somehow like saying something. Like he looked over and smiled, like I'm sitting here going, whatever. I'm just listening.
So Tim, with the literally tens of thousands of pictures you've taken over the years, do you have like a photo album collection of hard copy of these pictures, or are they all cataloged?
And how many
somewhere,
volumes are just on Leslie Leatherman?
Like, do you ever sit back and just go through some of your archives and say, I was there during some of the biggest moments in wrestling history?
There's just so much stuff. It's incredible. My basement's just full of stuff.
I was up in New Jersey at that, what was that called? Legends of Wrestling?
Legends of the Ring.
Legends of the Ring. And we got there and Bill Apter's there. And I said, Tim Walker comes. Because Tim Walker, tell him I have boxes of his shit and I need to get it to him. Let him know.
I still have to get up there. It's just, that was when he had left PWI and he went to WOW magazine. And it was, I have no idea how I managed to do it, but I was one of the very, very, very few people that managed to walk a political tightrope and be able to work for both those magazines at the same time.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was interesting. And both those magazines treated me very, very nice. PWI has always been my bread and butter, but I have to say that when Bill went over to WOW, I was one of the first people he called to let know. He actually told me ahead of time what was going to happen, and it was just...
I only met him that time, but we stood around and talked to him for probably 10, 15 minutes, and then we ended up running into him at the rest stop on the way out and talked to us there, too.
Nicer
and
guy
he was super cool.
Meet.
Yeah, he was really nice.
He does such great impersonations. He called me one time and did a Dusty Rhodes impersonation, and I was like... Is this Bill or is this Dusty Rhodes on my answering machine?
He was promoting that book he had. It's called Is Wrestling Fixed? I Didn't Know It Was Broken. Mm-hmm. And when we saw him at the rest stop, he starts whipping out and giving us hats. So I got pictures of us chilling by the rest stop with his hat on.
Yeah, he's a great guy. But getting back to the Patriot real quick second. When you're in the ring with him, do you ever get the feeling, this is what the impression I get whenever I see the Patriot wrestling, do you ever get the feeling like he knows everything that's going on around him, even behind his back? Like if you're the popcorn guy up in the 18th row, I think the Patriot knows how much change that you have in your hand when you're buying popcorn. I really do. I mean, his awareness is...
He doesn't miss a beat at all, yeah.
It's amazing to see. The only other guy that I've seen like that was Flair. Flair is so in tune with everything around him. Yeah. It's just amazing he's on a different level than anyone I've ever seen in the ring. It's just that sense of awareness is just, it's amazing to me because he knows 2 or 3 steps ahead of time what everybody's going to do. He probably knew 2 or 3 steps ahead of time what I was going to do, and I didn't even know what I was going to do. So he was wrestling Scott Norton one time in Baltimore, and he looked over at me and he winked, and I thought to myself, interesting. The champ winked at me. So I thought, that means something. So I took 2 steps to my right. As I took the second step to my right, Scott Norton landed at my feet to my left. And I looked up at Flair and I said, "Thanks, champ." And he kind of nodded his head, yes. So...
That's cool.
Yeah, that was a neat moment.
That's an odd matchup, too.
Yeah, it was. I don't think it was supposed to be Scott Norton. I think it was supposed to be someone else.
How did that match end, just out of curiosity? Because as big as Norton was, and was this in WCW?
Yes, this was in WCW during the NWO era.
So Norton's, I mean, he's still a pretty jacked guy, but he was...
And I think, wasn't Norton part of the NWO at one point?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm pretty sure Flair...
Well, Flair's always the champ, but was he the champion at the time?
It might have been when Hogan or Sting was champion at that point, but I'm sure Flair went over somehow.
I love matchups like that just is one of those you'll never see on television or otherwise.
And this is something else I'll never forget about Flair. I saw Flair wrestle Elegante 3 months in a row at the arena. And he made it tolerable 3 months in a row. It was an amazing, I think wrestling booking is all about moments. Not necessarily everything goes into it, but it's about those big moments. Like you remember that one big thing that happened in a match. And I think that was really Paul Heyman's philosophy when he booked ECW. He didn't really book wrestling, he booked moments.
And so we were just kind of talking about that, not to that degree on that level, but we were just saying how I think there's a lot of guys that, and not just elite, but like a lot of independent places you go, you see people that are pissed off because they're not being used the way they think they should, or they're not getting the matches they think they should, and they understand what it is. And sometimes when they're even extremely talented people, they give you good matches, but they don't give you good moments. And that's the difference between being a main event guy and being a guy that's a good hand that ends up helping the guys that give you moments get further up the card. And I think that's where it gets lost in translation, because you can hit every move well, you can execute everything you want to do in the match, but if you're not giving them that moment they won't forget, and they're just giving them a bunch of moves that they're going to see in other matches too, it's kind of like it doesn't matter how good it executes if you're not doing it the right way. It's kind of like we said with Tom, like it's about doing what needs to be done when it needs to be done and make sure people leave and remember it, instead of saying, oh, that match was pretty good, that match was pretty good, but whenever, Terry Funk got that fire thrown on his back, I'll never forget it as long as I live.
Or when Elegante took Flair off the top rope and it looked like he lifted him 3 stories high and threw Flair across 3/4 of the way across the ring, and Flair landed in a big thump, that's something... You don't remember the rest of the match, but you remember Flair climbing up to the top and getting thrown off.
And I think it's building a moment. You can build a moment like you can build a match, or you can build a card. Jimmy Snuka coming off the top of that cage, nobody will ever forget that.
Yeah.
But Jimmy Snuka looking up at the top of that cage before he started to go, and the people starting to be like...
If he'd have just flown up there real quick and then jumped before people got to put it together.
I think that's what's... When you're talking about executing and stuff, you're executing your moves great, but you're not connecting. You're getting the people, because that anticipation to that, and him getting up there, and then he doesn't just jump, but he throws the fingers out, and he does that, and it's just everything about that just made it. That's what made that moment. It was. That
I have nothing against people being able to go 100 miles an hour, but sometimes if you pump the brakes, you'll find out that people are going to enjoy it a lot more, I think.
So.
Yeah. Just going back briefly to the Patriot, how many times do you think you've wrestled the Patriot?
I don't know, because I've wrestled in probably 8 or 10 different leagues over the years and multiple times.
Yeah.
Probably, shit, it's probably been at least 40 or 50 times at least.
Wow.
Probably.
And when Jake would wrestle him, or vice versa, I would wrestle him. The other one was almost always out there, and you were still wrestling the Patriot.
Sure,
you know,
sure,
so
sure.
it was
Yeah, you were still in the match.
I mean, truthfully, because we
You
might
still found a way to get your ass kicked.
Well, I mean, truthfully,
even on the floor when you're watching.
We might do something where he wrestled Jake, in October, and then he wrestled me in November. But I still felt like I worked him in October and November. You know what I mean? So it was.
Counting tag matches, I got to wrestle him 11 times, and he was. The thing I learned, among other things, was that slowing down and just letting everybody absorb each thing. I mean, you can say that and you know it's true, but when you're wrestling him and the crowd's responding the way he's doing it, that was when I was like, okay, I'm in the ring while this is working. You know what I mean? Like, this is actually happening.
The first match that I had with him at that hot dome I mentioned, that was the first time in my career. I mean, I wasn't very far into it. I was probably a year in, like I said, but at that time we were wrestling 2 or 3 times a week, and then training too, and just going 100 miles an hour and trying to get every move you can in, and beating the hell out of each other at the House of Pain and all this other stuff. But that was the first match I remember realizing I could wrestle for an hour and not take a deep breath, as opposed to some of those matches I was having that were 10 minutes and you're so gassed by the time it's over that you're laying on the floor in the locker room or something because you can't breathe. Like, it was one of those things where there was a difference. Like, you felt like you went from like, I don't know how to put it into words necessarily, because I wouldn't trade anything what I did early on, in the training process and everything, but that was the first time that it was just a slap in the face. Like, you know what? There's a trick to being able to not blow yourself up, but still work, and for a long period of time. Because that match with the Patriot that night was probably 25 minutes or something. I mean, it was long, and probably way longer than it was supposed to be, because that's kind of the Patriots' thing. Once you're out there, doesn't matter how many.
He's going to make sure everybody that it's over. That
he just
match
keeps
is over
going
with
until he
everybody.
feels like it's time.
There's something really calming about wrestling him too, because at that time I worked Honky Tonk Man later on that night, and I was really kind of starstruck that night. I didn't want the match to suck, and I just my fiance was out there, my friends. I didn't want to go out there because a lot of my family came to see that, friends came to see that, and I didn't want it to be bad. I didn't want to embarrass myself. I didn't want to embarrass the school or everything like that. But when you're out there with the Patriot, it's just kind of like, it's so like a Zen moment almost, just because he's so in control of her. No, I'm not knocking Honky, but it's just, there was something about the Patriot that was just so, it just made it.
You knew you were still going to work, but you knew there was.
It was
your dance partner's taking the lead.
You'd
and
really
you know
have to screw up, right?
And it was I don't know. But I will say this too about that Honky Tonk Man match. That was he hit me with the guitar that night, and you took 2 great pictures. You took a variety of pictures, but 2 that stand out that are in my man cave. And
poster size.
Oh, the one is him that when I talked about earlier about how I would blow these holy shit moments, and it's the guitar hitting me on my forehead, and you can see the wood splintered. I mean, it's just
in the air.
It's perfect. And there was also a picture that you took where I had him in like a front chin lock, and my brother was living in Morgantown, West Virginia, about an hour and 20 minutes from here, hour and 15 minutes from here, and he called me one night, and he was just freaking out, going absolutely crazy, because he was looking like that independent wrestling guy. You know what I mean? I think they ended up condensing them down to like Reader's Digest levels, but it used to be a full magazine. Yeah. And there's that picture, and it's like basically the entire page of that is me doing that, and him calling, and he's just completely freaked out and going, awesome. "You're in a wrestling magazine! It's a picture of you in a wrestling magazine!" And I was like, wow.
That's awesome.
Well, one other thing I'd like to talk about the Patriot while we're just a little bit talk about him. One other thing I think he just does great. The night that he was at the Armory, and it was setting up the next card, and how he could talk the fans into wanting to come to the next show. Mm-hmm. that to me is such a lost art, and he did it so well. And it was like, I think he had a discussion with you about it, and he said, well, that's the way we were taught to do it, and that's good for business. And I think you had said something to him about, you could have just got on the mic and put yourself over. You didn't have to, do whatever you did. But he went and put that match, the next match for the next month over, and it made everybody want to come out and see that. I thought it was an excellent bit of mic work.
Yeah, I mean, I've always felt like the show you're on right now is your best advertisement for your next show. You can put out posters, you can do whatever, but these are people that are already there, already hopefully like the product, or at least like the business, the sport, and are there. So if you do something great on that night, and there's something, and they know, all right, this is this is going to lead to this.
And there's no better validation on one of those shows like that one where people are buying tickets on the way out the door.
Yeah.
For the next show. When can I get tickets? Do you have them now? We got to the point for a long time where we would have tickets to the next show at that show, and people will legitimately go over to the ticket counter and buy the tickets to the next show. Impulse buy. It's like,
it was so good they want to come back.
And he was the first when the training center, it was decided, all right, well, let's go from training center to maybe running some shows and everything, and these guys decided to do that. He was the guy that we reached out to for the very, very first show to be the guy, the guy at the top of the poster. And we just had our 8-year anniversary show, and he's still the guy at the top of the poster. And that's 8 years later, and I mean, that's right there.
That's not a loyalty thing. He continues to put asses in seats.
He does. He does. And you can put him out there with Gangrel, or you could put him out there with the newest guy, like he did that work with Reggie and some of those younger guys 2 shows ago, and
a 6-man tag.
And a 6-man tag, and he went out there with some guys that are going to be good, but that are still learning, and he pulls everybody through their hoop.
Yeah. Well, guys, we've done about 2 hours on the podcast tonight.
Already?
Yeah, we want to thank Tim Walker so much for coming in.
I hope I haven't bored everybody half to death.
Oh, gosh, I loved it.
We're definitely going to bring it back, because I assume we've only scraped the surface.
Let's bring him back with the Patriot the next time. That would be great.
I actually had a conversation with the Patriot at the last show, and he told me, he said, I don't do those shows, but I will do yours. I want to come in for you guys. So you never know. Maybe we get a
that'd be awesome. Little, get a little round table going.
So, I want to thank you personally, Tim, for documenting my professional career. We joke around about it, but like my man cave. I mean, I have so many memories on the wall. People could say I'm a mark, which I'll be the first one to say I am. But you've captured so many things that were just priceless moments in my life, and I really appreciate you doing that for me.
And that goes ditto for me, Tate, and just about everybody at Elite.
And I'll be honest. I don't know if any of us are ever in pro wrestling, the top 500, or a picture, or an article, or results, any of that stuff. I mean, your thumbprint has been on.
Not to mention, a lot of those have ended up on countless guys' gimmick tables, and not just Elite, but everywhere you've gone, you've put money in people's pockets.
From Abdul the Butcher on down.
I appreciate it.
I got in the 500 one time. We're still trying to figure out how, but I got your picture with me and Dreamer on there, and I remember you saying that was you said after that show, you went, that's the one where you looked up. That's going to be the one that gets in there.
Well, now I know how. You make
Thank you so much.
If you toss Dreamer in the picture with you and you got Tim F. Walker taking it, chances are pretty good.
Again, it's the Patriot formula. You really have to screw up to screw up.
My favorite thing, because when you were doing NWL stuff, my favorite was when Flex Phenom was 453 and I was 454. And I said, I think it's so great that we're beside each other. And he goes, motherfucker, you are behind me. just a little.
Got a little Phenom.
Before we sign off, did you have anything you'd like to say? Right?
Yeah, if we're going to talk about the 500, I'll just throw in my last 2 cents of the day here. The rumor that I actually took money from Professor Egon Ekton to get him into the top 500 is absolutely
Oh, wow, that's great.
I can't believe you revealed that to us.
Oh, man, how long have you been pooping that up?
Oh, my
Wow,
God.
that's amazing.
All right, everybody. On that shocking note, we want to thank Tim Walker for being part of the podcast. Tim, you're definitely going to come back, right? We got you on the hot seat. You're coming back, right?
Sure, I'll come back.
All right. No.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Tim. We really appreciate it. And everybody, we will see you next week. Take care. I am Tate Griffin, joined by Jake the Machine Davis.
Ow!
And Leslie Leatherman. Along with Tim Walker. Thanks so much, guys, and we will see you next week.
All right, Gallows.